Once Upon a Time in Hollywood premiered a few days ago in the US, and this thing is really pissing me off because living in Europe I still have to wait a lot before having the possibility to watch the latest Tarantino's movie. Moreover, my entire YouTube front page is full of videos like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood reaction, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood review, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood trailer, and so on. That's pissing me off even more because I hate spoilers, especially after I've waited so long for a movie. Being constantly forced to think about Tarantino and his works, I decided to make this video about him, but I'm not going to comment or review his previous movies. It's really difficult to speak about Tarantino saying something new or at least original about a director who completely changed not only the way in which movies are made, but also the way in which movies are watched by the audience. Tarantino has changed pop culture forever. Can you say something original about Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs or Kill Bill? Now, in 2019, people have written and spoken everything about those movies. In this podcast, I'd really like to talk about the fact Tarantino has been saying for years now that he will make only 10 movies in his career. Since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is his 9th film, it means that after that, he has only one more movie left to do. And there are also rumors that his last movie will be a Star Trek movie, written and directed by him. And I want to discuss this topic because I think this is a terrible idea and at the same time a wonderful opportunity for Tarantino and as a consequence for the viewers and for all the cinema geeks around the world. I'm starting with the easiest thing to explain, which, of course, is the first I said. It's a terrible news. Tarantino, in fact, is probably the most influential filmmaker from the past 30 years, and for this reason, it's a shame if he retires and stops to make movies. Every Tarantino movie is something special, even the ones which weren't a huge success or weren't masterpieces. Think about The Eightful Eight, for example. It isn't, of course, the perfect movie. It's long, slow, in some parts even repetitive and, in a sense, in some parts also boring. But it is also a movie with a wonderful photography and an incredible soundtrack, even if the soundtrack wasn't made by Tarantino but by Morricone. The characters are interesting and the dialogues are great, as usual when we speak about Tarantino's movie. All this means that even if The Eightful Eight is not the best Tarantino's movie, for sure, nevertheless it's above the average movies we usually see in theaters. Far above. And that's the reason why it's a shame if Tarantino will stop to make movies. But these things are pretty obvious, and everyone who loves movies can actually understand why it is a problem if one of the most important directors of his generation suddenly stops to create new movies. But Tarantino is a great screenwriter and, as a great screenwriter, is perfectly aware of the fact that in every story there should be a plot twist, something that changes what it seemed to be set. Because Tarantino has already announced that he could probably return to directing after a long pause at the end of his 10th movie. He said that if he'll take a pause after his 10th movie, then his first 10th movies would be considered a sort of collection, an ensemble of 10 movies which will ever be considered together and independently from the other works that he could continue to do after. And I think here comes the most interesting part of my argument. If Tarantino wants to make a sort of collection, a sort of Tarantino canon for future generation, and conclude this canon with his 10th movie, I think it's great news because then he could finally be free and gain some more liberty to do something different. Don't get me wrong, I love Quentin Tarantino, I love his screenwriting, I love his characters, and I remember pretty much all the lines of his movies. But I also think that he should try to do something different in his career, and I also like to see him directing a movie which is not also written by him. I've always loved authors with a strong voice, with a strong personality too. And when you watch a movie written and directed by Tarantino, you have that feeling that only Tarantino could have written that specific dialogue or made that specific shot. But have you ever wondered how a movie just directed by him would look like? I mean, Tarantino is capable of creating these incredible images to craft a wonderful photography in every movie of his own. Nevertheless, every movie is a Tarantino movie because it's been written by an iconic director who writes in a way which is so personal that sometimes it's even too much. I'd like to see a Tarantino movie written by someone else, because in that case we could see his real directing skills, which I feel sometimes has been underrated. So, in my opinion, I think this idea of creating a canon of 10 movies and then be free to experiment with something different is a great idea, and it could give some new and interesting opportunity to one of the most innovative and interesting entertainment maker of the last 30 years. Tarantino said he is going to adapt his movies for the stage and that he also wants to write a novel. Hopefully, after his buen retiro from directing, he will come back to movies, having gained the liberty to simply direct stories that he likes without having the fear of damaging his canon and his heritage in cinema history. I mean, directing without the pressure of creating a Tarantino movie, but with the goal of creating simply an excellent movie. An artist should always have the possibility to fail. Without that, he can't experiment with new ideas. We should give Tarantino the opportunity to fail, because I'm sure he can create new masterpieces from this possibility.